Great. Good morning, everyone, to our Greater Boston Climate Action Planning workshop on reducing emissions from the waste and materials management sector. Just a little bit of Zoom housekeeping as we get into the meeting. Please do keep yourself on mute when you're not talking, and feel free to use the chat feature to ask questions, and we will have Q&A and small group discussions will be held after the presentations. And then if you can go up into the three little dots and rename yourself in the Zoom with your name and organization or community, that would be great. Just by way of introductions, my name is Sasha Scheideroff. I am a principal planner at the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, MAPC, on the clean energy team. And I'm here with many of my colleagues from MAPC and some of our other partners working on the Greater Boston Climate Action Plan. So this morning we will be hearing our welcome remarks and then go into an introduction of the Boston Climate Action Plan and an overview of the waste and materials management sector and how we're thinking about it in the planning process and some of the ongoing work here in Massachusetts and in New Hampshire. And then we'll have a good amount of time for small breakout group discussions with facilitators and note takers in each of the rooms. And then we'll be going into our closing and next steps. So first off, we would love folks to rename themselves in the Zoom room, and then also introduce yourself in the chat if you can. If you want to put your name and organization, and if you feel like it, you can also put in why you're interested in attending today. And then just to get a sense of who's in the Zoom room, we would love you to fill out the poll, which have just popped up on your screen. Answer, what is your role? Are you local government, state agency, a nonprofit or advocate, interested resident from a for-profit business or other? And then where in the MSA, the Metro Statistical Area, are you from? Metro Boston, South Shore, North Shore, Metro West, Merrimack Valley or Greater Lawrence, or Southern New Hampshire, or other. So we'll give folks a minute or two to fill out the welcome poll. Yes, and please continue introducing yourselves in the chat as well. We'd love to hear who's in the room with us. Okay, I think 95% have participated in the poll. So we have a good amount of local government, whether it's staff, committee members, some folks from state agencies and nonprofits, someone from a for-profit business and other. The bulk of the people are from Metro Boston, followed by South Shore and Metro West, and a few folks from other areas within the region. So great. It is great to see you all today. Now we're going to go into our welcome remarks. So welcome to Representative Michelle Ciccolo. She's the state rep for the 15th Middlesex District in Massachusetts, which includes most of the town of Lexington and parts of Woburn and Winchester. And in early 2020, Ciccolo co-founded the bipartisan bicameral Zero Waste Caucus, which works to reduce and eliminate solid waste in Massachusetts through legislative action, state and local collaboration, and information gathering, education, and public outreach. She has a BA from Villanova University and an MS from the McCormick Graduate School of Public Policy at UMass Boston. And she is here with us to share some of her insights and expertise within the waste sector. And Rep. Ciccolo, if you just tell me next slide, I can advance the slides as you speak.
Sounds good. Good morning, everyone. I'm thrilled that you're here. This is a particularly fabulous project that MAPC is conducting, and I know that you're all very interested in diving into this planning process and contributing. So one of the things to note is that Sasha did a wonderful introduction, but we'll just share that when I founded the Zero Waste Caucus, I did so also with Senator Jason Lewis of Winchester, and he and I continue to co-chair the caucus. Next slide. And we're pretty big. In the 5 years we've been running it, we're 57 legislators. We have both Republicans and Democrats, and bicameral with both the House and Senate participating. And we do a wide range of legislative advocacy. We do some regulatory oversight, so responding to things that DEP might be doing, looking at things that the administration might be putting out, working on improving the budget to be able to address our waste systems as well. Next. If you want to know who we are, you can go to my website. We don't yet have a standalone website, but these names are all on the website in case you're curious if your legislator is on there. Next. And we are pretty strategic about how we try to engage. And I think the work of the caucus has been evolving over the last 5 years, but we each year put out a work plan and invite experts and other speakers to engage with us. We also do some tours. It's been a really productive caucus. Next. Okay, so next session, we are super excited about some of the progress we made this past session. I know the session isn't technically over yet, but the bottle bill got farther than it ever got before, having passed the Senate, and I would say that's probably going to be our top priority in the spring. Both Senator Lewis and I have filed a sort of an omnibus single-use plastic reduction bill, as has Chair Becca Rausch, who took it to the next level, looked at all the things that were in the many standalone bills, and advanced a plastics reduction bill as well. And extended producer responsibility, very exciting. In the most recent climate bill that we just passed last week, there is a commission to look at EPR, but there is also a whole slate of bills and some new ones that we're considering filing that would get at the issue of making the producers pay for the disposal of the end of life of a product. So some of the other pieces of legislation that we're contemplating, you can see the list of bullets, some fun ones like dishwashers in new schools. Who knew that we build brand new schools, we pay for them as a Commonwealth, and cities and towns pay for them, and we often don't put in dishwashers, which sort of condemns the school to never being able to use durable trays or silverware or any other durable food service items. Other states are ahead of us. New Hampshire is actually ahead of us on a PFAS ban. I was kind of shocked to hear that recently, but those are things I think we need to pick up and get to advance here in Massachusetts. Next. So why does all this matter, and why do we pursue zero waste strategies? You all probably know that there's scope 1, 2, and 3 levels of emissions, and in Massachusetts, we don't spend a lot of time considering the scope 3 emissions or things that are sort of outside our geographic region. And so many of the things that get manufactured that we consume are generating a tremendous amount of carbon, especially for the things that we use for 5 minutes and dispose of after a quick drink of a water bottle. And this CPRG process, I think, is going to help us a little bit get to thinking bigger than just what is being burned for emissions in our jurisdiction. Next. And so I suspect that since you're here, you all know why waste matters and what makes it important. But it's also about environmental justice. The majority of incinerators and landfills are in EJ communities or adjacent to EJ communities. That's true here in Massachusetts. It's also true for the waste that we export, which is a significant amount of our waste. So it has not only the problems of the methane that is produced from breaking down in the landfill, but also the toxicity when we burn the trash and it becomes ash and potentially gets into our soil and our water. So that also has a huge impact on public health. But one of the things I get kind of excited about is when we think about what gets beyond waste reduction is to get to reuse and refill. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity for local jobs that can't be exported, that can be high-tech jobs, they can be low wage entry level jobs like warehouse lift operators, that kind of thing. There's really a lot of opportunity to grow our economy in better strategies around waste. Next. So I've touched on these issues. It's about equity, it's about emissions and toxicity. Next slide. So the CCAP that we're looking at will potentially help us pursue some understanding of our consumption-based emissions. But it'll also bring stakeholders together, and these meetings are exactly that. We had an in-person meeting a few weeks ago in Lexington, which was very well attended, folks from as far away as New Hampshire, and these are the kinds of cross-border connections that we need to develop to be able to be more strategic and smart about what we do with our waste. And we're going to learn more about best practices. So go ahead. Next slide. So I think I've kind of said this one already. Keep going. We got to get to the meat of the meeting. So getting beyond recycling. Next slide, please. There's far more R's in waste reduction than just recycling anymore. And we used to call them the 3 R's. Now it's as many as 7, right? So we want to refuse the products that we don't need. We want to buy less. We want to reuse everything we can, do a much better job with repairing and repurposing. And then getting all the way down to sort of the most important thing is the recovery of the waste. Okay. So as I've sort of started to allude to, if we get beyond recycling, we can get to the next stage of refilling things. And one of the reasons why I'm so excited about the bottle bill is only 10 states in the country that have deposit return systems, and Massachusetts is one of them. And people often don't know that the cleanest stream of waste of recycled materials comes from the bottle bill, because it's not commingled with toxic plastics containers that might have household chemicals and other components that get into the recycling stream when it's single stream, which unfortunately a lot of cities and towns have gone to single stream. So I really want to encourage people to use the bottle bill system. We've been trained away from it, but the next opportunity, if we do a better job with recovering those materials from the bottle bill, is to get to a reuse and a refill system. Right now in Massachusetts, 38% of the bottles are being recovered, and that is the lowest in the world. So reforming the bottle bill is the step one in order to get to reuse and refill. Next. So why reuse? Much less carbon is emitted when you're actually using a bottle over and over again. You can see for glass, it's 85% less emissions. And for aluminum, it's 57%. Even plastic bottles themselves can be reused, although some folks don't think that's safe given the potential for leaching from the plastic into the beverage itself. But the upside potential is tremendous for reuse. Next slide. So 75% less carbon for PET if you use glass instead. And just look at some of these figures. If we switched 21 schools to reusable foodware, back to that issue of needing dishwashers, we'd save 220 metric tons of CO2 a year. And another opportunity, whenever you have closed-loop systems, those would be institutions, hospitals, senior living complexes, schools, where you can control the cafeteria essentially and how food is served. Switching senior living facilities could remove 4.25 tons of waste per year in a typical facility. So talk about low-hanging fruit. If every senior living facility simply switched to durable foodware and installed a dishwasher, we would save a tremendous amount of waste, but then also those upstream opportunities to reduce the carbon and not having to manufacture things that we throw out and use only once. Next. So people don't believe this can be done, but I've seen it, and I don't have too much more time to go into it. But a number of us went over to Europe last fall to see what they're doing over there, and it was astounding. They have a 98 and 99% redemption rate in Germany and France. They have proven that it can be economical when you reuse bottles. For beverage bottles in Germany, I think it's 57% of the total beverage market, excluding larger liquor bottles and milk and drinks sold in cardboard containers. They've proven that it can be done, and we saw awesome and inspiring robotics handling the sorting and the refilling, and optics being used, and absolutely advanced manufacturing, which is something that Massachusetts excels in and wants to, that part of our economy we want to grow. So we saw crating systems that ship produce around the country and then get displayed in here's some quick pictures, but you can get a sense of some of these amazing facilities over in Europe, and really high-tech reverse vending machines. As far as the eye could see, it was just remarkable what they're doing with their refill systems. Here's those crates that I was starting to mention. These are wholesale crates, and they don't have to use any cardboard, any paper lined with wax paper, that none of those things can be recycled if they're lined with plastics and waxes. And instead of shipping food that is in those boxes, they use these crates and they rinse them down in these amazing facilities that are low energy, because they use a centrifugal system to dry the crates, and they recycle the water. Just awesome stuff. So anyway, it can be done, and we should be doing it here. I think we probably want to get beyond. Here we go. Here's some of my other statistics. So it was 54% of all the German beverages, which is amazing. 87% of their beer. And back to that, how often can glass bottles be used? 40 times or more, which is why beverage companies actually save money once they are using these kinds of systems. It takes about 7 years for a factory to start paying for itself. And then there is essentially a net profit, because the glass bottles that they would be using over and over again don't have to be purchased. They're just washed and cleaned. So it's really amazing what happens when you invest in better systems to reduce waste. Okay, I think I'm just about done, because we got to get to the meat of this. Just a final couple comments. Europe is already well ahead of us. They've got plans as well as mandates that they get to reuse and refill a certain percentage. And we need, as a society in the US, to really consider better planning strategies, which is why this meeting is so much fun and so important. And just for a matter of scale, the Green Restaurant Association, which is located in Massachusetts, they estimate that all the restaurants together, just the global impact of their economy in the US, we'd have the 13th largest GDP if we just took all the restaurants in the US. So think about the amount of buying power that just our restaurant association has if we actually help them switch to more sustainable options. All righty. Sasha, I think I've probably gone on a lot, and I think there's so much more to say, but I know that we want to get into hearing from our participants and just giving some inspiration, which is all that I wanted to share. So if you want to get in touch with me.
Thank you, Rep. Ciccolo. Yes, I wanted to put up your contact information so that folks could get in touch with you if they're interested. And we're happy to share the slides, because I agree, seeing the photos from Europe are really inspiring to see that the potential and the fact that others are already doing this work in other places. So yeah, thank you again for introducing this topic and kind of going into a broad range of issues within this space. And sorry for skipping ahead on
No, it's a long slide deck as we go, and we can't do the whole thing.
Yeah.
We need to get into talking about the CCAP. So
Great.
thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. Great. Well, so now we're going to go into a little bit more around the Greater Boston Climate Action Plan, where we are in the planning process. And I'm going to introduce my colleague, Allie Shepard, who is a clean energy and climate planner here at MAPC and the co-project manager on this project.
Thanks, Sasha, and thank you again, Representative Ciccolo. So we'll just start with giving a little bit of an overview of the Greater Boston Climate Action Plan. And so this will be our regional roadmap to drive down greenhouse gas emissions, slow the impacts of climate change, and realize near-term community benefits. And I'm sure you're all well aware of the many benefits of reducing carbon pollution in our region, but includes improving air quality and public health, increasing local and clean energy jobs, reducing energy costs, improving public transportation and mobility, and many more. And so just as a note, this Regional Climate Action Plan is funded by a grant from the US EPA, the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant, and we'll also appreciate the support from the Department of Energy Resources and the Barr Foundation. And so when we say our regional climate action plan or Greater Boston, what we're referring to is this area that's shown in the map on the right. So this is the Boston Metropolitan Statistical Area, which is defined by the census, and it's an area that has shared social, cultural, and economic ties with a dense population center. And the Boston MSA includes 167 cities and towns in eastern Massachusetts and up into southern New Hampshire. And it includes over 4.7 million residents. And within this region, there are 7 regional planning agencies or regional planning commissions. So MAPC is one of the regional planning agencies, and we cover 101 cities and towns in the greater Boston area. And then there are 6 other RPAs or RPCs that serve the other 66 towns in the region. And finally, we're really excited to do this plan at a regional scale because this really enables us to solve a lot of the challenges that every single municipality is facing and think about, regional infrastructure and regional approaches so that we can do this efficiently, effectively. Next. And just as I mentioned, this is the list of all of the regional planning agencies, and they make up the Greater Boston Climate Action Plan Steering Committee. So there's MAPC, that's where Sasha and I work, and then we're joined by 3 other in Massachusetts and 3 in New Hampshire. And so we're actually right now in the second phase of this planning effort. And earlier this year, we submitted a priority climate action plan. We finished that up in March. And that included 11 priority greenhouse gas reduction measures that can be implemented by 2030. And we included these greenhouse gas reduction measures from 4 sectors: buildings, transportation, electricity generation, and waste. And as part of the plan, we did an inventory of the region's greenhouse gas emissions for 2017. And the report or the plan is available on our website. We can send out the slides with the links afterwards so you can access that. And so now looking ahead to our full comprehensive Greater Boston Climate Action Plan, we started working on this in April of this year, and we'll continue it through December of 2025. And this plan will look at greenhouse gas reductions across 6 sectors. So the 4 from earlier: buildings, energy, transportation, and waste, as well as agriculture, natural lands, and industry and manufacturing. And we're in the process of updating our greenhouse gas inventory to 2022. And the plan will also include greenhouse gas reduction targets for 2030, 2050, a workforce planning, benefits analysis, and many other aspects that will analyze each of the greenhouse gas reduction measures and prepare for implementation after the plan is completed. And here's just a snapshot of that greenhouse gas emissions inventory from 2017. And as you can see, buildings, which include stationary energy and electricity, are the largest source of emissions, followed by transportation, and then waste at just under 5% of the emissions. And on the next slide, you can see a breakdown of the waste emissions. And so you can see that the landfilled waste is responsible for a vast majority of the emissions, followed, and then there's also emissions from incineration and wastewater treatment. Just as a not so fun fact, I guess, is each person in the region generates about over 1,600 pounds of waste per person. That was in 2017. And I just want to note also that this snapshot of the waste emissions does not include, all of the manufacturing and upstream emissions that go into making our products. nor does it include the emissions generated from waste to energy or from incineration that generates energy that's included in the electricity generations sector. And so, as I mentioned, the core piece of this plan is our greenhouse gas reduction measures. And so when we say measures, this means a strategy, program, policy, or projects that groups of municipalities or regional entity can implement to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and advance equity and community priorities. And so just as an example, what a measure might look like in the plan is expanding existing and establishing new regional composting sites so that more customers can have access to composting. And then another example would be developing local government procurement requirements or sustainable purchasing policies to mandate solid waste reduction goals at the municipal level. And so today we'll get into a conversation about where you all see opportunities and challenges across the life cycle of stuff and of waste. So when we say this, we look at on the top right, or sorry, top left, see some of the upstream solutions like extender producer responsibility policies or how we manufacture the things we use. There's distribution, and then on the top right, we see consumption. So how can we actually reduce consumption through things like waste prevention solutions, bans, taxes, fees, education, outreach, and others. And then if we keep going down around the circle, we get to the waste disposal and processing. So that's really the more downstream solutions like waste diversion, recycling, composting, reuse, etc. And then we get back around the circle towards material extraction, which we also kind of group into the upstream. So that's all the material recovery, thinking more circular economy, and then go back around. So that's it for kind of the intro of the plan and the topic of waste and materials management in the plan. And I'll turn it back to Sasha.
Great, thanks, Allie, for that comprehensive overview. I now have the pleasure of introducing Kathi Mirza, who is the branch chief of the Municipal Waste Reduction Programs at the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, the Mass DEP. She leads a team that provides technical assistance and helps build municipal capacity for comprehensive, cost-effective programs that support the reduction, reuse, recycle, composting, and safe disposal of hazardous waste. She's cultivated and nurtured diverse partnerships to foster regional collaboration, training, and education, and networks for resources sharing across disciplines. Kathi has worked at Mass DEP's Bureau of Waste Prevention for over 20 years, and she holds a BA from the Carroll School of Management at Boston College and a master's in urban and environmental policy and planning from Tufts University. So welcome, Kathi, and we're excited to hear about some of your work.
Good morning. It's wonderful to really be part of this conversation and so important to connect the work that we're doing with the greenhouse gas impacts related to waste reduction. So I'm delighted to be here, and a number of folks on staff at DEP are also part of this conversation as well. Well, thank you for that introduction. This is going to be a higher level snapshot, including our overall waste reduction goals in the state and some key policies and initiatives that we have. Next slide, please. So first, let's take a look at what we are dealing with here in Massachusetts. So this data comes from 2022, but you can see in the bottom right that under 2022 that we disposed of 6 million tons of solid waste in that 1 year. And that equates to 4.5 pounds of trash disposed by every person in Massachusetts every single day. So it looks like the slide changed. There you go. A little more than half of that trash is actually disposed of in Massachusetts, with the vast majority of it going to one of the 5 waste combustors, while a relatively small amount does go to landfills in the state. We also want to keep in mind that more than 40% is actually exported out of state for disposal, because local landfills have closed and waste combustors are at maximum capacity. So we're seeing waste shipped to states like Ohio, New York, New Hampshire, Michigan, and Alabama at this time. Now, over the last 5 years, we've seen solid waste tonnage from residents and businesses decrease slightly. But the disposal of what we would call non-municipal solid waste, which is primarily construction and demolition material, that has increased by over 30%. So altogether, on balance, we've seen our disposal tonnage increase by 6% since 2018. Next slide, please. So every 10 years, Mass DEP updates its solid waste master plan. So a new plan is created for each decade. We're currently working in the process of the 2020 through 2030 plan, almost halfway through that. And we've set, as you can see on the slide, some very aggressive waste reduction goals. And we use a base year of 2018 for point of comparison for those goals. So we aim to reduce waste disposed by 30% by 2030. And as many of you may have experienced in your communities, COVID had a substantial impact on solid waste for a few years. We did see a big spike in trash coming out of cities and towns, particularly with hybrid work and school. But we're now seeing this come back down again to pre-COVID levels for many communities. Despite that, we still have a really long way to go to reach our 30% reduction goal. And you can see that we are aiming for 90% waste reduction by 2050. Next slide, please. So connecting with today's topic of waste and climate change, we know that reducing our solid waste will have a very substantial impact on the greenhouse gas emissions that are generated from the disposal of this waste. If we're able to actually meet our 2030 master plan goals, it's estimated that we could prevent 1.7 million metric tons of carbon dioxide, or the equivalent of 200 million gallons of gasoline. Now, the state's climate policies look, as Rep. Ciccolo mentioned, look explicitly at disposal impacts. And they're targeting the reduction in carbon dioxide from waste combustors, from reducing plastic disposals. So there are initiatives underway, as mentioned, to reduce and phase out single-use plastic products and packaging. But while it's not in our solid waste master plan, we're also learning more about the upstream impacts from the entire life cycle of the stuff, all the stuff that we use and buy every day. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which some of you may be familiar with, estimates that about 45% to nearly half of all of the global greenhouse gas emissions can be attributed to the production of products, materials, and food. And that's because all of that energy is being used to mine materials, raw materials, process, transport, manufacture, and used in packaging. And as mentioned, so much of this is single use. Next slide, please. So we have targeted materials here that we aim to address and gain the most advances in waste reduction in these areas. And the numbers here represent a couple of different things. Well, first, that there are waste composition studies, or characterization studies, I should say, that are done every 3 years at the waste combustors across the state. And what that tells us from those characterization studies is what we are still throwing away as trash. And by looking at what's still in the trash, it helps us to focus our efforts on developing infrastructure, capacity, and resources to help residents and businesses capture these materials through a variety of different programs. So you can see on the slide here, the materials that we're targeting, the largest amount that we're seeing still in the waste stream, and these numbers represent about half, about a 50% reduction of what we're currently seeing. And I'm sure that most, if everyone on the call here, I hope, is familiar with the Massachusetts waste bans that we, prohibit the disposal of many of these, many materials, whether it's common recyclables, certain items that are hazardous. We don't want to see any of these materials in the trash. We really want to capture their value. Next slide, please. So our solid waste master plan, as I mentioned, is really this high-level framework. And the way it really kind of comes into action is that we have these action plans that are put together in subcommittees. And so it's groups of people that come together and sort of hammer out what are the problems, what are the issues, where are the opportunities, and what can we do to move the needle in these places. So you can see on the left here our action plans. We are looking at organics closely, construction and demolition materials. We have recycling market development in motion, and closely reducing and reusing upfront to get at some of those upstream opportunities through waste reduction. On the right-hand side notes some of the subcommittees and working groups that are already working together, that are already in motion. And as I mentioned, it brings together stakeholders to try to come up with very realistic and meaningful outcomes and actions that will really work on the ground. And I highlighted here in yellow just a couple that I think that really rise up in terms of some of the very clear opportunities to reduce greenhouse gas emissions being the topic today, since so much are generated through the organic stream or through, as I mentioned, construction and demolition materials. And so I highlighted the deconstruction work. Couple things from that construction conversation that we've learned through these deconstruction work group meetings is that the greenest building is the one that's already built. And there are so many opportunities to look at lower carbon products that could be in use, like low carbon concrete, for example, and where procurement plays an important role in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. On the organic side, so much of the greenhouse gas emissions are from the production of food, and then coupled with that, the disposal of wasted food. As many of you already know, organics will be kept local, they're managed locally, so that would require less transportation to develop more infrastructure and resources for this, and it can create local jobs and, of course, replenish the soil that we have. Next slide, please, which is my last real substantive slide, but this really gives a very brief snapshot of the key initiatives that we have at DEP and the waste reduction work that we do for both the municipal branch and also the commercial branch combined. So what we do together is we really aim to provide tools, resources, best practices, guidance to help move the needle in these spaces. So we offer grants and financial support to municipalities, to nonprofits, businesses and institutions that are at different stages of addressing the waste that they create. We have technical assistance programs, one that's directed explicitly for municipalities through our regional municipal assistance coordinators that work hand in hand with city and town officials to help develop and strengthen and support their programs. We also have technical assistance for businesses and institutions through our Recycling Works program, which we offer in cooperation through CET out in Western Mass. We have lots of outreach and educational resources. I have a few images here on the slide to show you some of, hopefully you're familiar with Recycle Smart Massachusetts, the do's and don'ts of recycling across the state, that we've worked with the recycling facilities, with the MRF operators, so that we could come up with an honest, accurate, up-to-date list of what is acceptable at these facilities for recycling to help enable it so that it would be done correctly and effectively. Beyond the bin, the lower right-hand side of the screen is a resource for items that can be captured for reuse or recycling, but that don't go in the curbside bin or to a transfer station for recycling with paper bottles and cans. It's all the other stuff that would have value and that where there are opportunities to capture that and keep it in circulation. We also have waste bin inspections and some enforcement that takes place to strengthen compliance, and some performance standards that are required for construction and demolition materials. And last slide, please. And so while these programs are really working to, expand services for residents and businesses across the state, we're always in the process of looking at how we're doing and evaluating our programs and revising them and tweaking them to try to really maximize opportunities and adjust over time so that we can reduce trash, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, meet our goals in partnership with all of you. So here's my contact information, and feel free to reach out with questions. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathi. It's always great to hear about all the resources that your program can provide to municipalities. So hopefully folks also are inspired to do work some locally as well. We did want to give also a short shout out to New Hampshire. I think we had a couple of folks from New Hampshire on our call in the introductions. So we don't have anyone speaking about existing efforts. Rep. Ciccolo mentioned the PFAS ban. We also wanted to mention the New Hampshire DES also has a solid waste management plan from that was adopted in 2022 with similar disposal and waste reduction goals for 25% by 2030 and 45% by 2050. So those are, I think, a little bit lower than the Massachusetts goals, but similar time frame of trying to reduce waste. So before we get into our breakout discussions, I did want to just pause to see if there were any questions that came into the chat during the conversations. Otherwise, we can move into our discussions. I don't see any questions that have come in. So I think we'll forge ahead, and hopefully folks will have some good conversations in the breakout rooms. And so now we'll be spending the next 20 to 30 minutes in our small breakout groups. We do have a few discussion guidelines as we get into this conversation. So we do ask that folks be fully present. If you need to step away from the breakout room, feel free to do so, but we encourage you to be present, have your video on if possible. Our discussions won't be recorded, but we will have note takers in all of the rooms. We encourage you to use the raise hand feature in Zoom and have one speaker. So you can go down into your Zoom bar and do the raise hand button. Also, we ask that you use I statements and speak from personal experience. Move up, move back. So if you're someone who talks a lot, challenge yourself to listen. If you're someone who doesn't talk a lot, challenge yourself to participate and share your perspectives. And the next bullet is around sort of confidentiality. So you can feel free to share the lesson from the conversations and bring some of the key themes and messages away, but outside of this space, don't name names. And we also want folks to enter the space and be curious about others' ideas and opinions. We will be spending some time on the following questions. So I'll read them out loud, and then Emma's gonna set up the breakout rooms, and you'll have both a facilitator and a note taker helping to move the conversation along. The 4 questions are: what challenges or successes have you experienced in addressing waste in your own community and work? Second is: how can local government or regional collaboration address challenges and help scale solutions across the production life cycle? So thinking about the upstream manufacturing and distribution phase, consumption, and the downstream sort of waste processing phase. The third question is: not all communities are impacted by waste the same way. How can we ensure that strategies are equitable and provide benefits to low income and communities of color? And then last but not least, what resources, trainings, or data are needed to successfully reduce emissions from waste and materials management? And thinking really at the sort of local and regional scale, although if there's ideas around sort of state needs as well, feel free to share those. It's always tricky. If you do have any last thoughts that you were like mid-sentence or about to share, feel free to put them into the chat because we'll be capturing all of that in the notes and key takeaways. So we did want to just spend a few minutes to let the groups just do a high level report back of any key themes or points that you heard in the meeting before we close it out. So room one, I think, Allie, that was your room. I forget who your note
Yeah,
taker.
and Fentilis will share
Okay,
some of what we
so
talked about.
whoever wants to share from your room.
I can go ahead. So we talked a lot about the challenges and successes question. Capacity came up a lot. So losing champions, for example, of certain programs has contributed to like deterioration of initiatives, such as when they like transition out of town roles and move elsewhere, as well as not having like a good number of volunteers. So folks noted that we can't continue to like rely on volunteers to do this work. So, you know, it's a labor challenge as well. We also talked about the like behavioral shifts and how that is a challenge and it takes time, and the importance of like public education and outreach needs to have on, for example, like a full-on campaign to get folks bought in within kind of the context of thinking about like restaurants and involving them within waste reduction as well.
Great, thank you. Cassidy, do you want to share a few thoughts from our breakout?
Yeah, so one of the main themes that we heard was a really big emphasis on education and outreach at all scales and with all different types of waste. We also heard about larger communities kind of paving the way and other communities looking up to those communities to see what successes and challenges they have, and using that as an opportunity for regional collaboration, as well as several opportunities where the state could support communities by having requirements around data or expanding existing bans like the organics bans. Heard some other challenges around turnover and growth. So overall, a lot of different topics discussed.
Great, thank you. And then Julie and Emma.
I can hop in to start, and then Julie, if you want to fill in anything. So we had a great conversation and talked through the different questions. Some of the successes we heard about were some communities being able to work collaboratively across different departments internally, and then also bring in local community groups in some ways to help expand bandwidth for certain things. We sort of also talked about the idea of certain communities leading the way and then others having a chance to replicate those models in their own contexts. And I think something that came up that people thought would be helpful was having more like regional learning or peer learning collaborative spaces. I believe there's one in the South Shore Recycling Cooperative. So having more like that at the regional level. I think, let's see, some other things that came up towards the end were some challenges at the state level. We're having challenges with gathering specific data, and then also challenges around public messaging. So thinking about how the state and Mass DEP can provide, or is already providing, some of those educational messaging to get the word out about behavioral changes. Yes, I think that's mostly it, but Julie, let me know if you have anything else.
I think that summarized it well.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I'm just gonna do this. There. Oh, okay. Having issues with my Zoom today. So thanks for doing the report backs. It sounds like everyone had good conversations and a lot of similar themes across the three groups, as well as some concrete examples of both challenges, successes, and needs. Just a bit while we close this out, I want to thank everyone for joining today, and also thank our speakers, Rep. Ciccolo and Kathi Mirza, for joining and sharing about all of the great work that is happening. And thank you all for joining and spending an hour and a half of your time with us. So we wanted to just share some continuing opportunities to engage in the Greater Boston Climate Action Plan. This workshop sort of finishes up our fall series, and we'll be developing our draft list of greenhouse gas reduction measures. And then over the winter months, so January through March, we'll be doing an engagement roadshow and also have a prioritization survey, so folks can continue to help inform and shape the plan. If you want to stay up to date, if you're not already on our listserv, we will be sending out regular updates and opportunities to engage through our Greater Boston CAP listserv. And then we also have our Greater Boston CAP website where we will be adding the slides and recordings from this event there. And then if you have any questions or want to follow up, feel free to contact us at cprg@mapc.org. That goes to a bunch of us on the Greater Boston CAP team so that, you know, if you have any questions, we'll follow up. And then we also wanted for the municipal folks on the call just to tell people that our technical assistance program, our TAP program, the proposals are for winter round of funding is now open, and it's open until December 13th. So we have a few more weeks. And it's a very simple application, but it basically is funding that allows MAPC cities and towns and MAPC to access our staff and resources. And I believe other RPAs have similar funding pots as well. I don't know if they're what their application process is like, but you should, if you're not within our region, but in a different RPA, you can feel free to reach out. And if you have ideas around waste projects or plans or even maybe some of the data things, you can feel free to reach out to us at cprg@mapc.org in case there's a specific project that you want MAPC support on in the new year. And with that, again, thank you all for joining, and I hope you have a great rest of your Monday and a great rest of your week. So thank you all.
Thank you.